You know the Nephilim. You've heard about the giants, the hybrid offspring, the creatures that should not have existed, the ones that terrified armies and forced God to respond with the most catastrophic event in human history. But here's what nobody tells you. The Nephilim were not the beginning of the story. They were the result of it. And the beings responsible for what happened, the ones whose decisions set everything in motion, they are not gone. They were not destroyed. They were not erased from existence. They were chained. And there is a profound, terrifying difference between destroyed and chained. Destroyed means it is over. Chained means it is not. This is the story of the Watchers, not the offspring, the fathers. The supernatural beings who descended from their assigned place in the heavens took human wives and introduced into human civilization a darkness so complete, so total, so structurally corrupting that God looked at the earth he had made and called it an emergency. And if you watched our video on the Nephilim, you already know what that emergency produced. You already know about the giants, the hybrid bloodlines, the disembodied spirits that outlasted the flood and wander still. But you don't yet know the full story of who sent them into the world. You don't yet know what the Watchers actually were before they fell, what they were assigned to do, what they swore to each other before they descended. And most importantly, what specific knowledge they introduced into human civilization that God considered so catastrophic, so unforgivable, so permanently corrupting that the punishment was not death. It was chains, eternal chains in darkness, held for a judgment that has not yet come. Because here is what the book of Enoch records, and what the Apostle Jude confirms in your New Testament, and what the church has never once read aloud from a pulpit on a Sunday morning. The Watchers are still there. Right now. As you watch this, chained beneath the earth in a darkness so absolute that Enoch himself wept when he saw it. Waiting, and what they taught humanity before those chains were fastened around them, the forbidden knowledge, the corrupted arts, the darkness they seeded into human civilization thousands of years before the flood. That knowledge did not go into the chains with them. It stayed here. It has always been here. And once you see where it is, you will never be able to unsee it. To understand the Watchers, you first have to understand what they were before the fall. The Watchers were not rogue angels acting out of ignorance. They were a specific class of supernatural beings, assigned by God himself to a specific purpose, with full knowledge of what they were doing when they chose to violate it. The ancient Hebrew text calls them the Urim, the Watchers, the Guardians, the ones appointed to observe. Their assignment was humanity, not to interfere, not to alter, not to interact, to observe and to guard, to stand at the boundary between the divine realm and the human one, and ensure that boundary remained intact. Beings who had existed in the presence of God, who had seen the heavens from the inside, who understood with absolute clarity what the boundaries of creation were and why they existed. And they watched. They watched the communities forming, the families multiplying, the daughters of men living their lives in the world below. And something shifted. The book of Enoch records it with devastating simplicity. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they wanted them. Not as a passing temptation, not as a momentary weakness, as a decision, calculated, deliberate, collective. Because what happened next was not one angel losing control. It was 200 of them making a covenant. The leader of the Watchers was a being named Semyaza, and Semyaza understood what he was proposing. He understood the weight of it, the irreversibility of it. He told the others he was afraid, not of the descent, but of being the only one who fell. Afraid he would carry the weight of the transgression alone, while the others changed their minds and returned to their posts. And so he made them swear. Enoch chapter 6 records the oath. Every single one of the 200 spoke it. We will all make an oath and bind one another by curses, not to alter this plan, but to carry out this plan effectively. A binding covenant among supernatural beings who understood exactly what covenants meant. They swore together, and then they descended. The text names the mountain, not Sinai, not Moriah, Mount Hermon, the summit that sits at the northern edge of the Promised Land, 9,000 feet above sea level, permanently snow-capped, visible for hundreds of miles in every direction. They chose it deliberately, because in the ancient world, mountains were not just geography. They were the meeting place between the divine and the human, the place where the boundary between realms was thinnest. And 200 supernatural beings who had been assigned to guard that boundary descended through it together, swearing an oath that none of them would turn back. They came down on Mount Hermon, and the world that existed on the other side of that descent was never the same world again. Now here is where the story becomes something the church does not read aloud. Because most people, when they hear about the Watchers, hear about the sexual transgression, the sons of God taking human wives, the forbidden unions, the Nephilim that resulted. And that is in the text. Genesis chapter 6 confirms it. The book of Enoch details it. But the unions were not the only thing the Watchers brought with them when they descended. They brought knowledge, specific knowledge, named knowledge. Knowledge that Enoch records watcher by watcher, teacher by teacher, subject by subject. And when you read what they taught and sit with why God considered each piece of it an unforgivable corruption, the story stops being ancient mythology and starts being something far more disturbing. Because the knowledge did not die with the flood. It survived. And we are still living inside it. The first name Enoch gives us is Azazel. Azazel is described in the text as the one who bore the most blame, not Semyaza, who organized the descent, not the others who followed. Azazel, the one the archangels focused on first when God called them to bring judgment. Why? Because of what he taught. Azazel taught men the art of making swords, knives, shields, breastplates, the science of metalwork applied specifically to the production of weapons, the knowledge of how to take raw material from the earth and forge it into something designed to end human life efficiently. Before Azazel descended, humanity did not have this. And Enoch records God's response with devastating specificity. In chapter 10, God speaks directly to the archangel Raphael about Azazel. He says this: "The whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. To him ascribe all sin. Not some of it. All of it. The entire catastrophic corruption of pre-flood civilization laid at the feet of one watcher and the knowledge he introduced. But Azazel did not only teach weapons. He also taught women the art of beautification, cosmetics, jewelry, ornamentation, the specific techniques of adorning the human body to maximize its power of attraction and seduction. Modern readers dismiss this because cosmetics and jewelry do not seem catastrophic. They seem trivial, decorative, harmless. But that is not what the text is describing. The knowledge was not about appearance. It was about the weaponization of desire, the systematic introduction of vanity and seduction as tools of manipulation into a civilization that had not previously possessed them in this form. Azazel taught humanity that the body could be a weapon, and the world has operated on that knowledge ever since. The second watcher Enoch names is Semyaza himself. Semyaza taught enchantments, the cutting of roots. Ancient scholars consistently connect this to the manipulation of natural biology. the use of plants and organic material for purposes that bypass the natural order, the deliberate alteration of human consciousness through external substances to access what should not be accessible. This is not a modern idea. According to Enoch, it was introduced deliberately by a being who understood exactly what doorway he was opening and chose to open it anyway. The third name is Armaros. Armaros taught the resolving of enchantments, the science of sorcery not just as a practice, but as a system, a methodology with its own internal logic, knowledge that allowed human beings to operate in the spiritual realm through means that God had not sanctioned. Then there is Kokabel. Kokabel taught astrology, the reading of the stars not as navigation but as divination, the systematic interpretation of celestial movements as a map of fate, the belief that the positions of stars and planets could reveal and even determine the events of human lives. After Kokabel, entire civilizations built their social structures around it. Kings consulted star readers before decisions of state. Wars were timed according to celestial events. The fates of empires believed to hang on lights in the sky that Kokabel had taught humanity to read as a language. Astrology is not a modern invention. It is not a medieval superstition. According to Enoch, it is a direct inheritance from a fallen supernatural being who introduced it as part of a coordinated corruption event. And as of right now, it is one of the fastest growing belief systems on Earth. Packaged as self-knowledge, rebranded as personality science, stripped of every trace of its origin. But there is one watcher whose contribution may be the most unsettling of all. His name is Penemu. And what Penemu taught was not weapons, not sorcery, not astrology. Penemu taught writing. Enoch chapter 69 records it directly. Penemu instructed mankind in writing with ink and paper. Not because writing itself is evil, but because of what writing made possible that had not been possible before. Lies that could be recorded and presented as truth. Histories written by whoever held power to serve whoever held power. The permanent encoding of deception into human civilization. Before Penemu, a lie died with the person who told it. After Penemu, a lie could be written in stone and outlast 1,000 generations. And then there is Gadriel. Gadriel is connected in some ancient traditions, not just to the descent on Mount Hermon, but to an earlier moment, a moment in a garden, a conversation with a woman, a suggestion that the boundary God had set was not really a boundary, but a limitation, not protection, but control. What Gadriel represents is the corrupting whisper, the voice that tells humanity the thing God withheld was withheld not for your protection, but to keep you small. That voice did not appear once in human history and disappear. It is the oldest and most consistent voice in the entire biblical narrative. And it came from somewhere. Now listen carefully, because this is where the ancient text stops being history. Everything the Watchers taught, weapons, beautification, enchantment, sorcery, astrology, writing as deception, the corrupting whisper, it did not stay in the pre-flood world. The flood came. The Nephilim drowned, the physical bodies destroyed by water. But the knowledge was already embedded, already spread, already passed from person to person across generations of pre-flood humanity. And Noah's family carried the memory of it onto the ark. Not as practitioners, but as human beings who had grown up inside a civilization already saturated with what the Watchers had taught. The knowledge was in the world before the flood, and it was in the world after it. This is why Genesis 6:5 uses the language it uses. Every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Every intention, only evil, continually. That is not ordinary human sinfulness. ordinary human sinfulness is inconsistent. What Genesis 6 describes is total saturation, a civilization so thoroughly contaminated by what the Watchers introduced that there was no corner of it left untouched. The flood reset the population, not the knowledge. The archangels came for the Watchers after God gave the order. Raphael came for Azazel first. He bound him hand and foot, cast him into a pit beneath the desert, covered him with sharp stones, sealed him in a darkness so complete the text says he was blinded by it. There, Azazel remains, not dead, bound, waiting for the day of judgment. Michael came for Semyaza and the others, bound beneath the mountains, chained in the darkness beneath the earth. Their cries recorded by Enoch as the sound of beings who understood with absolute clarity what they had chosen and what it had cost them. And here is what the New Testament confirms. The Apostle Peter writes in his second letter, "God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment." Chains of gloomy darkness. Kept until the judgment. Not until their sentence was served, until the judgment, a day that has not yet come. And Jude verse 6. These he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. Everlasting chains. For judgment on the great day. That day has not come, which means the chains are holding. For now, there is a question the text raises and never fully answers. And it is the question that should sit with you long after this video ends. If the Watchers are chained, imprisoned beneath the earth in a darkness Enoch wept to see, then why does everything they taught still operate so openly in the world? The weapons industry is the largest and most profitable industry in human history. The science of manufacturing desire through physical appearance is a $1 trillion global economy. Astrology has more active practitioners today than at any point since the pre-flood world. Not hidden, not underground. On every phone, in every social media feed, normalized for a generation that was never taught to ask where it came from. The manipulation of human consciousness through substances is experiencing a cultural renaissance so complete that major institutions now fund clinical trials for what Semyaza taught before the flood. And the corrupting whisper, the voice that tells humanity the boundary God set is not protection, but limitation. That voice has never been louder. The Watchers are chained, but what they taught was never chained with them. It outlasted the flood, survived the centuries, adapted to every new form of human civilization. And it is operating right now at a scale the pre-flood world could not have imagined. Jude quotes Enoch directly in the New Testament. He calls him the seventh from Adam, a prophet whose warnings were so specific and so urgent that an apostle of Jesus Christ embedded them into the canon of Scripture. And Enoch said this about the Watchers and the world their descent produced. He said it would happen again. Jesus confirmed it. Matthew chapter 24. As were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Not like the days of Noah in some general sense. As were the days of Noah specifically, the days when the boundary between the supernatural and the human was deliberately violated, and the knowledge that violation produced was seeded into a civilization that did not know how to resist it. Those days are not past. They are present. The Watchers are still in their chains, waiting for a judgment that is coming, and the knowledge they left behind is still here. Which means the question is not whether it exists. The question is whether you can see it.